You got issues around occupancy that's still going on. You got issues around aging that are going on in these communities. People are publishing and getting older. So you got all these dynamics that are going on, and you've got just, I would say, you've got the new pioneers who are now coming back to places like this, okay, who are bringing new challenges and new demands and new requirements. So you have all this operating in these areas that are going through shifting sands, new economic picture, new residents who are there. Economics has driven it, so you've got issues around the shifting of black and white in the population, immigrants versus non-immigrants who are living in neighborhoods. And so how do we begin to find ways and solutions that integrates these people within a safe, neutral space? And around activities that bring them together, that cut across it. And a lot of those things have to do with arts and culture, okay? A lot of it has to do with food. A lot has to do with how do we energize public space. I mean, we learned, for example, that in Harbor Place, the beauty of Harbor Place is that Harbor Place is a live, active place that brings people together of all people, regardless of economics, regardless of race, because they come into a place where they know they can have a safe, common place and enjoy entertainment, enjoy food, enjoy other kinds of retail experiences, you know what I mean, all there for them. And so we've learned how to do that. So Miguel's thing says that if we can find a way that reaches across the commonness of our people and integrates them at a point where they can begin to build social networks that lead to the other changes, so that all of a sudden, that when you're talking to that city councilman who won't give you the money that you need in your neighborhood, and you start meeting him at the market, you see what I'm saying? You're having a dialogue with him in a safe space, and maybe he begins to shift the way he thinks. You know, and so that's a lot of what Miguel is trying to deal with both arts and culture and food and nutrition, around giving people models through human development overlay districts of how they can see and visualize their spaces and how it can change from decisions that you make. And you can make incremental decisions and look at it, you see what I'm saying, visually. Those are some of the things that's the power of that, do you know what I'm saying? And it becomes international because of the fact that our communities are becoming international. We are more international as communities than we ever have been. You see, because when immigrants came into communities before, they moved into specific neighborhoods. They lived in their neighborhoods. We had, you know, if you look in places like Boston and other places, very segregated housing markets. Even today, you know, there was a study that was done that surprised me, that you know where the city that has the most segregated housing market today? Atlanta, Georgia. Okay? Because people are moving, it's driven by economics. And it's driven by product in the markets. Okay? And so what we have now is this whole new thing that's happening. So how do we get on top of that so that we don't create segregated communities? Or we don't create communities that are enclaves where people live, but yet they never come together. Never come together at the intersection of opportunity.
The intersections of opportunity look different depending on where you stand on the opportunity ladder.
Yeah.
And for an example, if I am the union guy that can do houses, can be a carpenter that can fix roofs, but I can't work at a scale that is commensurate with my standard of living because the contractor, and I'm not the contractor, can get immigrant labor at $10, $5, and half of them. They don't pay it all since they can just call the ICE and get rid of them. So now my consciousness is not systemic in that how do I organize the immigrants and us together into one force that says everybody will be paid decent. Instead, my consciousness is how do I get rid of the immigrants and have a national immigration law that denies them human rights, hospitals, schools, and other kinds of things. And then the radio and everything else begins to pump that message out. Depending on where I stand in my neighborhood, if someone says, we're going to bring some trailers in here, help people come back to New Orleans. Well, no, not in my neighborhood, you're not. I'm not against the poor people, but they ain't coming up here. Yeah. And so, so there has to be in this cultural piece and in this awareness piece, where do we get to a social responsibility and a social consciousness that I'm not going to undermine my child, my economics, and so forth, is what some would say. for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
But yet if you don't,
Yeah.
you're still undermining, because you're creating the environment where you got to live in a gated community and can't walk out because of crime and every other kind of social disease. So I don't know, at some place that conversation has to.
Exactly, and if we can find those places at the public market, or we can find them in a museum that is more than a museum, it's a community place of behavior, or we can find them at a theater production where our children are going to, who are now integrated in a different way. We can find in our school systems. We've got to use all those venues, and we've got to have a different dialogue than we've been having. Okay, I mean the issue. I think what I find is that people are not getting as engaged as much as they used to in discussions, in good discussions. I remember, you know, it's funny, when I moved into my neighborhood where I lived for almost 20-some years, I was one of early number of black families moving into that neighborhood. And we should have discussions in this, like in a living room like this, once a month. We would come together and talk about issues around race and challenges and things like that. And we were willing to deal with it in the front of it, you know what I'm saying? And they were powerful ways that we changed that neighborhood because we had open dialogue, you know, and we faced the issues that were happening to us. And today we just simply turn our backs on them somehow, and we don't deal with them. We don't embrace the change, and so we can find ways that forces almost that we can make nutrition and health a big issue, which has become the issue around nutrition and health and obesity and hypertension, and those things begin to cross racial and ethnic and other things, and we can bring people together in a space and begin to talk about that. Maybe that becomes a way to frame other things that we do. But we've got to start the dialogue somewhere, and this is just one strategy. Again, it's a small strategy, as we well know. You know,
it's an informed strategy the way you've made a presentation. A lot of the conversations are collective ignorance, piling on each other's ignorance and justifying, you know, really false perceptions and answers, because one person agrees with another person agrees with that person, and it's what's that word? There's a word for it. It's like
mutually reinforcing.
Yeah, mutually reinforcing, and it's group thing. It's group thing with the same group, without the diversity of another opinion, and without factual information that challenges the group think, and information that makes you stop and say, oh my God, wait a minute, this messes up my mental model. And doesn't give you an answer, but once your mental model's messed up, you start looking for more.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, we don't have enough messed up mental models.
There's no means to engineer a different context for people to explore, discuss, have different experiences.
Yeah.
One thing I've noticed when talking to people when I'm door knocking is you get people talking about assets in their community that used to exist, and there's this weird disconnect where they can remember what used to be, and they can recognize that there's something different now that's, quote, not like it used to be, but the consciousness of the change and of the radical implications of that shift isn't there.
Yeah.
So they're going through life having lost something like a market that used to be there, not recognizing just how much they lost, you know? And they just kind of go on, and I think there's been a progressive losing of things without acknowledging the loss.
Yeah.
70% of black children are born into a single family situation.
Right.
Yet in 1970, all of my wife's relatives and all of her friends and her whole community, the only person that didn't have a mama and a daddy was her, because her daddy drowned when she was like 5 years old. But everybody had a mama and a daddy. They were all poor. They lived right next to the Florida Project. They were, you know, but they sustained a family and a family value and a sustainable thing around concepts of work and responsibility that, you know, just in my lifetime, and in not even in my life, just since 1970 to now, I use 70 as a nodal point, it's transformed itself totally opposite.
Oh yeah.